Oh yeah. Yes. Irn-Bru. It's gonna be a lot of that today, guys. Oh, I forgot what it tastes like. Hello, everyone. We're wearing some questionable things today because we're watching the historical fantasy, the epic Scottish film, Braveheart. Freedom.
Just to explain what's going on.
That's why we have the Irn-Bru. I apologize in advance to all Scottish people. We had our amazing Scottish friend, Rachel, watch the movie for us and then tell us everything that was wrong with it because we're not the biggest.
This is not our history.
No, we don't know it very well. So she helped us a lot. You might be hearing her voice every so often in the background as like the voice of God, describing the video to us, the Scottish God. Let's go watch the film. Alright guys, we are ready to go and attack this movie. Our amazing friend Rachel has made us a true Scottish feast, okay? We've got vegetarian haggis, because, well, that's my fault, I'm vegetarian. We have turnips, we've got potatoes, we have Scotch broth, we have venison stew, we have snowballs, ginger cookies, lox and oat cakes, we have Dundee cake, we have alcoholic ginger beer, and what else do we have, Judy? Whiskey. After. Her favorite.
I shall tell you of William Wallace.
Let's start off this with just a little bit of historical background so you guys understand who William Wallace is and actually why he's important to Scottish history, because I had no idea. I was just like, yeah, Braveheart, Mel Gibson, yeah, I see his butt. William Wallace was a Scottish knight who became one of the main leaders of the First War of Scottish Independence. He was knighted, he was appointed Guardian of Scotland, and he was a prominent military leader until his defeat at the Battle of Falkirk in the year 1298. After the death of Alexander III, there was a time of political unrest which ended with the English king, King Edward Longshanks, kind of claiming the throne of Scotland for himself. This coup sparked the rebellions in the lead up to the wars of Scottish independence, which Wallace was a really big part of. The reason Wallace himself was so immortalized was because he was the main character of a poem, an epic poem by a guy named Blind Harry, named The Wallace. And he was forever immortalized in Hollywood with this epic movie of Braveheart. It's a very fun film. It's a little bit over the top with more historical fantasy than historical accuracy. Yes. But yeah, so now whenever we think of William Wallace, we now get to think of Mel Gibson's face. 1280.
So about the year 1280, the implication is that the English are already ruling here. But actually the first invasion of Scotland by Edward I was in the year 1296. So in fact, King Alexander III was still alive in 1286, and so at this point would still be. Wait.
Yes, he would.
Yes.
He'd still be ruling. Why they chose 1280, we don't know.
His daughter, Margaret of Norway, who was never inaugurated, was actually, though, ruling up until about 1290. But she was supposed to be married to Edward I, who is a bad guy in the film.
Yeah.
But she never survived.
She never made it back from Norway to Scotland.
Edward I then helped mediate to elect the next Scottish king.
Yes, in 1292. But then Edward had a fun little change of heart. And he was like, nah man, I won't be king. And that sparked the rebellions of 1296. And also just like a quick note, we are kind of skimming over a lot of history. This is like the Coles notes because there's so much like, complex political, dramatic stuff that's actually happening.
Among the farmers of that shire was Malcolm Wallace, a commoner with his own lands.
Malcolm Wallace, all right? William Wallace's father. So at the time when this movie was made, all the way back in the ancient year of 1995, we did not know who William Wallace's father's name was. Like even now, his name is contested. So the actual name, Sir Malcolm Elderslie, comes from that poem, the epic poem called The Wallace. So that's where they kind of got that name from. But then we have found an actual seal on a letter written from William Wallace in Lübeck in Germany. The seal actually the letter actually says his name was Alan Wallace. It could be a pseudonym, we're not sure, but there is kind of still this controversy. But we do know the Wallaces were not commoners. They weren't these like little farmers in the Highlands. First of all, they were lowlanders, check, and they were noble. Malcolm Wallace was a knight, so was William Wallace. And if Malcolm Wallace was actually William Wallace's father, he would not have died as early in the movie as we see here. He actually would have died the same year that William Wallace died.
So, what are they wearing? So bad. Belted plaids or kilts of any sort that we see are not worn in the 13th, 14th, 15th, or early part of the 16th centuries. They were especially not worn in this manner, if they were to be worn. So it'd be like wearing this. Raven is a nice example. If she turns around, you see that her shirt is backwards. That is the same thing that's going on in the actual film.
Te Domine, Domine.
So even relative to the common person's clothing, they would not have worn rags, as you see in the film. They would have hemmed their clothes, they last longer in that fashion, so all of it is just inaccurate relative to the actual costume for the time period and also how you're wearing clothes.
Yeah.
So.
Oh yeah. Oh, it's like Jello.
That's not what dead people look like, especially if they've been dead for that long.
William.
Oh my god, it's Mad Eye Moody. Bagpipes?
Bagpipes?
What? How dare?
What on earth?
Playing outlawed tunes on outlawed pipes.
Bagpipes. They were only known to be officially in Scotland around the 14th, 15th centuries, and they were never outlawed. Some people say that they were banned to some capacity in 1746 in the Act of Prescription, but it's not actual historical fact. The only time bagpipes are outlawed is at 7 a.m.
Many years later, Edward the Longshanks, King of England, supervised the wedding of his eldest son, who would succeed him to the throne.
So the marriage between Isabella and Edward II, first of all, did not happen until 1308. So William Wallace was already dead. And it also did not happen in London. It happened in France. Also, I'm going to spoil the movie for you. First of all, there's some dating issues here, not just because of this weird match, but also because in the movie, William Wallace and Isabella get it on. They fall in love, all this stuff. But Isabella was not born until 1295, and she would have been in France this whole time. So unless William Wallace can both teleport and do time travel, there's some weird stuff going on here, and it's just kind of creepy if you think about how old she would have been in the real time if they actually did hook up.
Princess Leia, what are you doing now?
Right.
Yo, watch yourself, girl.
Perhaps the time has come to reinstitute an old custom. Grant them Prima Nocta.
The Prima Nocta, not really a thing. No evidence of it happening in the United Kingdom. In the film, they likely did it to vilify the English. And we're the first that never,
enacted this.
Yeah, during his rule. So that's just a no.
No, just no.
Just no.
Among these was Robert, the 17th Earl of Bruce, the leading contender for the crown of Scotland.
Look at that smile, eh? It's like a political campaign. Robert Bruce was a national hero of Scotland. He's on their money, so that's a big deal, guys. He was one of the claimants to the throne after King Alexander III died, and he actually ended up becoming king of Scotland in the year 1306 after all the wars ended. So good for him. Robert took part in the revolts against King Edward I that were led by William Wallace, and he led Scotland during the First War of Scottish Independence against England. So Robert the Bruce was actually not the Earl of Bruce, so I don't know what they're doing in the movie there. I guess they're just trying to make it sound more legit. Anyways, he was actually the Earl of Carrick, and the fun fact is that Robert and William Wallace probably never met in real life. There's no kind of historical document or some sort of evidence of them actually ever encountering each other during their lifetimes. So there's that.
And how is your father? We've missed him at the council.
His affairs in France keep him long overdue.
Oh no, since that's why I was in hiding. Oh. So no one else knows he's a leper. Because he wasn't. Also, his father was not a leper. Just no. His name was Robert de Bruce, the sixth of Annandale. There's all this complexity when looking at how the Bruce family kind of sided with King Edward over the years, but eventually they were against him, and Robert the Bruce became king. So both of them deserve a lot more than what this film is giving them, essentially. Oh my god, it's still real Mad Eye Moody!
Look at how teased his hair is.
Let's talk about the hairstyles too. Mel Gibson's got the best mullet or the worst mullet. It's the 1980s literally just vomited all over this movie in the 1200s. So obviously they did not have mullets. We also have no evidence at all of the Scottish people at this time braiding their hair, dreadlocking it, putting like weird feathers and fur. Yeah, it's like they just went to like Burning Man or something. Moving on. Imagine this is your wedding day and then like someone just gets like crushed by a rock. That's an auspicious wedding day.
Are you going to teach me to read then?
Well, if you like.
Aye.
And what language?
Now he's just peacocking.
In the film, they make it seem like William Wallace speaking a bunch of languages is insanity. So the nobles of this time, especially particularly in the United Kingdom for this time period, and for the better part of Europe, were speaking French. You would also see Norman French, because it was the language of the nobility. So legend goes that he was also educated at Paisley Abbey, and so he probably would have also spoken Latin and maybe a bit of Gaelic.
Also possibly Italian. They kind of allude to him speaking Italian here too. There was no sort of evidence that he went to Rome. There's a letter saying that he was intending to go to Rome, but we don't know if it actually happened. So he could have spoke Italian too, but this is mostly because he's a noble, so he would have automatically known all these languages. Not like, you know, this, wow, ooh, a commoner learned these languages. Take my hanky, my snot rag, so romantic.
Wrong. In a wrong way.
No. What is she tying a toga?
Oh, he's been in Rome.
He's been to Rome. He said, this is how all the cool people are wearing it now. I always feel like somebody's watching me. I get no privacy. Whoa. Oh my god! It's got some nunchucks. It's just a fish wound.
Corporal, as a military rank, was not invented until 1775, and it was invented by the United States. So, no.
Hello, my name is Diego Montoya. Kill my wife. The murder of the Sheriff of Lanark was actually a real event. This attack/murder on Sir William Heselrigg was touted as being the start of the Wallace rebellions, as according to that lovely epic poem we mentioned earlier called The Wallace. There's also like nothing about this whole like revenge of dealing with his wife's murder. So like, get that out of your minds. So thanks for watching, you guys. Thanks, Jude, for coming back. Thank you to Rachel for giving us all that information that we knew nothing about and educating us on Scottish history. If you like the channel, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss another one of our fun reaction videos. A big shout out to all of my patrons over on Patreon. If you like the channel, if you like what we're doing, you want to support us, go and become a patron on Patreon to help make the dream come true. Follow Jude on Instagram at Jude's Archives. Here are all of my socials, and as always, stay dirty, my friends.